Welcome back to The Explainer. So, have you ever looked up from your phone totally in a daze and realized, wait, did an hour just completely vanish? Yeah, we've all been there. Today, we're synthesizing some really fascinating insights to uncover exactly why that happens. More importantly, we're going to look at how our endless consumption of visual media is just fundamentally altering our modern human connections. We're diving into two massive forces shaping our daily lives: the endless digital echoes we just continuously consume, and the rhythmic human pulse we actually genuinely need. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's a quick roadmap of how we're breaking this down today. First up, defining the visual infinite. Then we'll examine the modern digital pulse. After that, we're going to look at where those echoes actually meet connection. And finally, we'll explore the future of our digital rhythms.
All right, part one, defining the visual infinite.
So, to really get this, we need to zoom out and grasp the sheer, overwhelming scale of the media landscape we're navigating literally every single day. I mean, this is the environment that surrounds us the absolute second we unlock our devices. This brings us to our first core concept, the visual infinite. Basically, this is an environment of endless visual echoes that heavily promotes passive consumption. Think about how modern platforms are built nowadays. There's no bottom to the page anymore. The feed is designed to be literally mathematically infinite. And the key word here to remember is passive. When you're stuck in the visual infinite, you aren't actively building a relationship or trying to solve a problem. You're just absorbing this endless stream of imagery and videos, kind of letting the current carry you along. Now, let's totally flip that and contrast it with our second core term. This one is all about the intimate, deeply human element of interacting with each other, the digital pulse. Unlike that silent, passive scrolling we just talked about, a pulse implies a heartbeat, right? It requires life, energy, and most importantly, a back-and-forth rhythm. This is that random text asking a friend how their day went, the banter in a lively group chat, or actually making the deliberate choice to jump on a video call. It's a two-way street. It demands both people to be fully present and engaged. Honestly, this whole dynamic really just boils down to the number two. Think about it for a second. Even with the thousands of apps and platforms we have right at our fingertips, practically everything we do online falls into just two fundamental buckets: passive consumption versus active interaction. You are either floating out there in the infinite sea of visuals, or you are actively maintaining your digital pulse with another actual human being. And this breakdown perfectly captures the everyday reality of these two competing forces. Honestly, if you were to map out your own daily screen time right now, I guarantee it would look a lot like this. See that massive chunk taking up most of the space? Yeah, that's the endless swiping. That is the visual infinite completely dominating our time. Then there's that medium slice, liking content. It sits somewhere in the middle, kind of acting like a fleeting nod of acknowledgement across a crowded room, but it's not a real conversation. And then look at that tiny little narrow slice. That represents our deep, deliberate interactions, like video calling. As you can see, the pulse is literally getting squeezed out.
Moving right along to section two, the modern digital pulse.
Since we know the pulse is shrinking, it's totally worth looking at how we actually got here. Tracing this timeline chronologically shows a really fascinating evolution, moving from deliberate communication to this highly visual, continuous feed. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, digital connection was super deliberate. You literally had to sit at a big, clunky desktop, boot up a messaging client, and actively type out text to one specific person. Then hit the 2010s, and our connections got much more visual. We were sharing entire albums of our weekends, giving friends this rich window into our lives, but it was still mostly kept within our own social circles. But now, look at the 2020s. The whole model has shifted away from connecting with friends to just consuming this algorithmic, infinite scroll of visuals from total strangers. Notice how these characteristics highlight a major point. A true digital pulse isn't just something that happens to you. It absolutely requires your deliberate participation. Let's break these down real quick. First, it requires two-way interaction. You can't have a pulse all by yourself. Second, it operates on a human rhythm. This means there are pauses, there were natural breaks and stops, unlike that endless feed where you can just, stare blankly at your screen for 3 hours straight. Third, it demands active engagement. You literally have to think, type, speak, and actually listen. And finally, it has an intimate scale. The pulse isn't about broadcasting yourself to 1 million followers. It's something shared directly between a few individuals. So this brings us to a massive, central pivot point for this explainer. We are swimming in this infinite ocean of visual content. But is it fundamentally rewiring how we reach out to others? I really want you to take a second to process that before we move forward. Because think about it. If the vast majority of our digital energy is just spent passively consuming, What energy is actually left over for actively connecting?
All right, on to section 3, where echoes meet connection.
This is where we smash these two parallel concepts together to see exactly what happens when our endless consumption collides with our hardwired human need for interaction. Looking at them side by side, the tension is just so obvious. We're constantly caught in this friction between taking in media and actively reaching out. These two modes are completely at odds. The visual infinite wants you passive and expansive. Meanwhile, the digital pulse demands you to be active and intimate. Every single time you pick up your phone, you're unconsciously picking a side in this digital tug of war. This sequence maps out the exact mechanism of how an infinite feed slowly, quietly drowns out the rhythmic pulse of our relationships. It almost always starts super innocently in step 1, right? You just open an app to kill a few minutes. But step 2, that is the danger zone. This is where you see a friend's post, you tap like, and your brain quietly ticks a little box that says, okay, I interacted with them today. But actually, you didn't. You just consumed an echo of them, which drags us right into step 3, the weakening of the pulse. Because you feel this weird false sense of connection through these visual echoes, you just stop sending that text. You stop making that call. Which brings us to our final part, section 4, the future of digital rhythms.
So where do we actually go from here? Well, our specific everyday digital choices act as either a visual echo or a true heartbeat of connection. If your habit is endless swiping, you're firmly stuck in the visual infinite, and the impact there is isolating consumption. You might feel totally entertained, but at the end of the day, you're alone. Now, if you're just dropping automated likes, you're sitting right at the intersection. It's very surface-level interaction. Better than nothing, for sure, but it completely lacks depth. But if you make the conscious choice to engage in deliberate video calling or direct messaging, you are firing up that digital pulse, and that results in deep, meaningful human connection. This brings up a really powerful thought from our sources that challenges you to look at your own habits through a brand new lens. What happens to human connection when it is filtered through an endless sea of visual echoes? Seriously, when our main way of knowing what's happening in someone's life is just watching their perfectly curated visual echoes, we lose the messiness, the nuance, and the real rhythm of human connection. We basically just become an audience to each other's lives, rather than active participants. Ultimately, the big takeaway here isn't that visual media is bad. Not at all. It's just that balance is absolutely crucial. True connection requires breaking that infinite loop to find your own digital rhythm. You have to actively choose to step out of the passive stream and deliberately engage with the people who matter to you. So I want to leave you with this final thought. The very next time you unlock your phone, ask yourself, are you about to just consume another echo, or are you going to create a pulse?